everyone, this is R.D.HAMAYANTHI. I'm working as an assistant professor of English in A.D.M. College for Women, NAGAPATTINAM. Today, I'm going to take about Plato, a literary critic. Before moving on to the topic, you must understand what is meant by a criticism. That means criticism, the classical criticism refers to the analysis and evolution of literary works from the perspective of ancient Greek and Roman philosophers and scholars. This approach examines the structural, thematic, and stylistic element of the classical text. Classical, which means the old criticism. Classical texts to the better understand of their cultural significance and enduring their influence. So literary criticism, it is a branch of study concerned with defining literature. So if we want to study literature, you must understand what the criticism plays a role in literature. If you understand the relationship between the criticism and the literature, you can able to get a lot of things while reading a new piece of work. The literary criticism begins with a question, what is literature? So everyone must think what is a literature means. It is a satisfactory definition of literature is difficult to arrive at. In the widest sense of the term, literature is simply anything that is written. The written form of the work is said to be a literature. Literature is writing which expresses and communicates our thoughts, feelings, and attitude towards our life. It is unique. It must be a lifelike, but it is not life. So you must understand that it is a lifelike, but it is not the real life of the human being. So the literary language has to be ambiguous and connotative. Literature imitates, depicts, represents, and presents, embodies the people and objects, societies, and the ideas. Literature has many possible functions. Its main function is its fidelity to its own nature. The nature and the function of a literature are correlative. A good work of art is both individualistic and engendered. So, in order to find out the uniqueness and the generality of a particular work of art, the help of literary theories, literary histories, and literary criticism are needed, because if you want to know the individual quality of a work, you also need to study the criticism. So we can able to get different points of view what others said to us. So when the art of rhetoric flourished in Greek communities, a set of rules were paved the way for the growth of art of criticism. So among the Greek geniuses, it was Aristophanes who in his play The Frogs who first undertook the reflecting on certain critical points like the choice of the appropriate words and its form and structure, significance of morality and ethical aspects. So, craftsmanship in a work of art, he considered these merits while he was discussing the relative merits of Achilles and Euripides. Thus, with the Aristophanes began the art of criticism, though the critic and the creative artist were the same. So the division between the two is a later development process. Now let me move on to the introduction about Plato. Plato, he was a renowned Greek philosopher who lived around 428 to 348 before Christ period. So Plato is considered to be a classical critic. He belongs to the old period of criticism. So he was a student of Socrates and a teacher of Aristotle, and together they laid the foundations of Western philosophy. Plato's extensive writings covered a wide range of subjects from politics and ethics to metaphysics and epistemology. The chief interest was the philosophical investigation, which forms the subject of the work. In his work, the dialogue, it is so called because The problems are discussed in the form of question and answer. So in the book, the dialogue, there will be a question answer format where the problems of a critic and how the criticism should be take should be done in a great way. These are the points they had discussed in the work, the dialogue, and the chief interest of them is being Socrates. His dialogue have been used to teach a range of subjects including philosophy, logic, ethics, rhetoric, and even mathematics too. Plato's other works are Ion, Critic, Protagoras, Gorgias, Symposium, Republic, Theodorus, Philosophers, and Laws. In all these books, Plato deals on the topic like ethics, metaphysics, politics, than an art because he had given the importance to politics and he had not considered that art is important. He had given the realistic views in life. So, in the work The Republic, it is defined by justice, virtue, and happiness. So, all the three combine to form the work of The Republic. Plato's text is designed so that Socrates first asks what is a justice is, and then he explains that until one knows, they cannot understand if the justice is a virtue and provides their happiness. And then Plato introduces the characters of Socrates, Philophus, Polemarchus, Glaucon, and the other characters in the work Republic. So, if you take about the book one, the introduction of the characters takes place, and each discusses and defines their own through conversation with Socrates. The central topic and the question in this book is what is a justice? So, if you take about the book 2, Plato has Socrates and the Glaucon discusses the polis and the Greek city state and defined it in its ideal form, the Callipolis. The men discusses the ideal guardian of the city through moral and educational terms, ultimately focusing on the need for just a guardian who is brave, moral, and also a well educated one. So, and if you are moving to the book 3, the discussion of the ideal guardian still it continues and the focus is to the shift of the discussion of a honor and strength as key importance. Here, the point is made out an ideal or complete guardian may also need educated in philosophy. And in book 4, there are three points that constitute the whole thing. The concept of Socrates finally gives his answer to what constitutes a just society. A city does not use money so that there is no poverty or rich. So then the second point is if a city that has the wisest rulers uncorrupted by wealth. And the third point is a city with the best guardians who value their education more than anything else. So these 3 points combined to form is just a society. The republic, that means this work reflects the importance of being just in the world, and by being just, one is happy. It is a text that describes an ideal city and a way through which just philosophical governance is create happiness. So now the Plato has divided the art. According to Plato's philosophical views, he had divided the art into two main categories. One is fine art and another one is applied art. This distinction was based on the Plato's theory of ideas, which saw the fine arts as closer representations of the ideal forms, while the applied arts were further removed from the true reality. So, the division of art. Plato divides art into, as I said earlier, fine arts and useful arts. Fine arts is like literature, painting, sculpture, and music. So these are indulged in for new pleasure to the readers as well as the listeners. So the useful arts like medicine, agriculture, and so on. Plato views on fine arts related to the theory of ideas. He saw art as imitating the object of life or nature. So why he says that imitating the object of life means here literature, that means everything is imitations. It is like life like not life. So the imitation of objects take place. And now the theory of ideas. Plato's view on fine arts are related to the theory of ideas. The idea that Plato deal with republic or the ultimate reality. Things are conceived as ideas before they take practical shape as things. He says art as imitating the object of life or nature. He felt that all the objects in the world are not originality, and the people got an image of its original copy through imitation. According to Plato, ideas are the ultimate reality to him. In Plato's point of view, poets produce a second copy of the original one by imitating. So there are two steps far away from reality and originality. So Plato divides poetry as dirhythmic or purely lyrical or purely mimetic, such as the drama in which the life is imitated in action and the speech, and the mixed kind such as the epic in which the poet is partially lyrical and partially introduces the action and speech. In Republic, Plato attacked poets and poetry for particular reason and in particular context from the philosophical outlook. Plato himself wrote poetry and he wrote poetically in his prose works. In Republic, his main preoccupation are the political and not artistic. He banishes the literature and the art as they have not have any political utility. According to him, a poet writes because he is the inspired one. Plato's view on poetry and art. Plato had a complex and often critical perspective on the role of poetry and art and society. He believed that art and poetry shall be morally corrupting and distracting from the pursuit of truth and virtue. So Plato's division of poetry. In his philosophical work, Plato categorized the poetry into three distinct types on its purpose and relationship to the truth. Plato divides poetry as lyrical, purely imitative, such as the drama in which the life is imitated in action and speech, and the mixed kind, such as the epic, in which the poet partially makes lyrical flight and partially introduction, action, and speech. Views on poetry and art. Plato was the first who inquired into nature of imaginative literature and put forward the theories which are both illuminating and provocative. He banishes literature and arts because they had no political utility. According to his theory of mimesis, art deals with illusion or it is an imitation of imitation, that is twice removed from reality. The poet writes a poem not to convey his thought, but only because he is inspired. A poem is not possible unless the poet becomes a mad himself. As a moralist, Plato disapproves the poetry because it is immoral. As a philosopher, he disapproves of it because it is based on falsehood. Philosophy is better than poetry as a philosopher deals with an idea or truth, but the poet deals with illusion always. To Plato, truth of philosophy is more important than the pleasure given by poetry. So, poetry cannot take the place of the philosophy. Plato disapproves poetry itself because it appealed to the emotion. His observations on poetry applies to dramatic poetry also. According to him, the poetry appeals to behavior instinct and it has a bad moral influence on those who see and hear it because they learn to admire it and try to follow the weakness and fault it represents. He is much worried about the actors because by playing the roles of evil characters as cowards and criminals, let these evil qualities enter into their nature and they will change their roles as a evil one. So next we are moving to the philosophical investigations of Plato. Plato's philosophical investigations work is relatively divided into the nature of reality, knowledge, and the condition. In his seminal dialogues explored the profound questions that continue to shape the Western thought. So, in his philosophical investigation, he has emerged the Western thoughts. So, philosophical investigations of Plato's chief interest was which forms the subject of his great work, The Dialogue. He was not a profound critic, and his critical observations are not found in any single book. In his The Work Republic, he says that the ideas are the ultimate reality. To him, art deals with illusion, and an artist or a poet takes man away from reality, then towards it. Objections to poetry uh, is if the poetry is not philosophical or any pragmatic. He objected the poetry from the point of view of education, from philosophical point of view, and from the moral point of view. It is not ethical because it promotes the undesirable passion. It is not philosophical as it does not provide any true knowledge, and it is not pragmatic because it is inferior to the practical arts and therefore has no educational values. So, according to Plato, the mathematician is a demigod because he says it can be verified. If you have any problem, by using the formula, you can verify the problem and you can get back a solution. But poetry is a result of the impulse of the moment. So, poetry can neither make a better citizen nor a state of better organization. So it cannot take the place of philosophy. Socrates' view is that any impression, if we choose to make, leaves a permanent mark on the minds of young people. To Plato, God is perfectly good, and so the changeless, incapable of the conceit. But poet represents gods as revengeful, lustful, and even cruel, and men as gluttonous and choleric. So, on moral grounds, most poetry is unsuitable. So the poets have depicted gods and the great heroes of the past with a moral weakness which will have a bad effect on the younger mind. But children can be told untrue stories if they are edified. Plato objects poetry as immoral and says that it is based on falsehood. So now we are moving to the theory of ideas. Plato's philosophical concept of theory of ideas is a central tenet of his idealistic metaphysics. It posits the interference of a higher perfect realm of abstract forms or the ideas that serves as a true essence and a blueprint for the physical thing in the material world. Now, the Plato's rejection of materialism. As I said earlier, he had given the importance to the philosophical concept. He just given the importance to the current society and he had objected the rules of artistic values. So the Plato's poetical philosophical worldwide was rejected and the materialistic perspective that reality is composed solely of physical matter. Instead, he believed in the existence of an immaterial realm of abstract, eternal, and perfect forms or ideas. So, Plato's criticism of individualism. Plato believed that the true virtue and justice would only be achieved through collective harmony and not individual pursuits. He was skeptical of the sophist, emphasis on the self-interest and rhetorical skill over moral character and social responsibility. Plato had a strong criticism of poetry and art rooted in the philosophical views. He saw poetry as a dangerous influencer that could corrupt the minds of the citizens and undermine the ideal society, ethical or philosophical, or it may be a pragmatic. He objected poetry from the point of view and from the moral point of view. It is not ethical because it promotes undesirable passion, and then it is not philosophical as it does not provide any true knowledge, and it is not pragmatic because it is inferior to the practical arts and therefore has no educational value. These 4 points were said in the objections to poetry. Poetry causes the needless lamentation of the characteristics at the imaginary events of sorrow and happiness. It numbs the faculty of reason and paralyzes the balanced thought and encourages the weaker part of the soul. So, poetry has no healthy function and it cannot be called good. Thank you, girls.